paint, watercolor paint, acrylic paint, oil paint, spray paint, tempera paint. Hello again everyone, Nuri here. I am HCA's art director and program instructor in the Antelope Valley. I teach a number of art classes in both Lancaster and Palmdale, as well as making these online videos and tutorials for HCA Live. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Instead of a more step-by-step process tutorial, we are going to be talking a little bit about color. In specific, color theory. Color is obviously a very essential part to painting and many other forms of art, and so widely used, yet I also feel that it's not discussed enough, especially for the folks who are just starting out and trying to learn the basics. While there is a general consensus onto certain colors, for example, the sky is blue, the grass is green, a deeper understanding of color and how to use it can add some complexity and more nuance to any art pieces that you're trying to create. By learning more about the relationships between colors, you can more properly use them and effectively harmonize them to create stronger pieces of art. To better illustrate this, we are going to be making a color wheel today. Color wheel might be something you're familiar with, and for this specific version, you are just going to need color. Doesn't matter what kind. Crayons, colored pencils, pastels, markers, Sharpies, ink, dye, paint, watercolor paint, acrylic paint, oil paint, spray paint, tempera paint. It's all the same. You can follow along with any of those materials as long as you're comfortable with them. With that being said, let's dive into some color theory. For those who are not familiar, a color wheel is a visual representation of the colors and their relationships. We're going to be building our own, and we're going to start with the primary colors, of which there are three. So these three primary colors are blue, red, and yellow. Primary colors are noted as such because they cannot be made, meaning they cannot be created by combining any other colors. I often use this in class to test my students by asking them, what colors do you mix to make blue? Trick question, you can't make blue. It just is. These three colors are the building blocks for the rest of our color wheel and to identify relationships between the colors down the way. Even if you're not using a primary color in your design or painting, let's say you're making a logo or an image that uses purple, it's still essential to know what colors create purple so you can identify what colors might go well with that very purple. Next up, we have our secondary colors. Secondary colors are the colors that are formed by combining any two of the three primary colors. There are three secondary colors: orange, purple, and green. You can create each one by using two of the three primary colors. Here are the general rules of secondary color creation. Red and yellow make orange, blue and red make purple, and yellow and blue make green. Keep in mind that these color mixtures only work if you use the purest form of each primary color. This pure form is known as a color's hue. We will be discussing hues a little bit more later on. After secondary colors, we now have tertiary colors. Tertiary colors are created when you mix a primary color with a secondary color. The most important thing to remember about tertiary colors is not every primary color can match with a secondary color to create a tertiary color. For example, red can't mix in harmony with green, and blue can't mix with orange. Both mixtures would result in a slightly brownish color, unless of course that's what you're looking for. Instead, tertiary colors are created when a primary color mixes with a secondary color that comes right next to it on the color wheel. There are 6 tertiary colors that fit this requirement. Red and purple, which make magenta. Red and orange, which make a vermilion-like color. Blue and purple, often referred to as violet. Blue and green, which make a teal-like color. Yellow and orange, a nice light amber. And then yellow and green, which make a chartreuse-like color. Okay, great. So now we know what the main colors are, but we all also know that when we're choosing color, there is a lot more than 12 colors to choose from. This is the idea behind the color wheel, a circular graph that charts each primary, secondary, and tertiary color, as well as their respective hues, tints, tones, and shades. We will be covering all those in a little bit, but visualizing colors in this way helps you choose color schemes by showing you how each color relates to the color that comes next to it on the rainbow color scale. In case you don't know, the colors of the rainbow in order are red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, or Roy G. Biv. When choosing colors for a color scheme, the color wheel gives you opportunities to create brighter, lighter, softer, and darker colors by mixing combinations of white, black, and gray with the original color. These are known as hues, tints, tones, and shades. Let's start off with hue. Hue is pretty much synonymous to what we actually mean when we say the word color. All the primary and secondary colors, for instance, are hues. Hues are important to remember when combining two primary colors to create a secondary color. If you don't use the hues of the two primary colors you're mixing together, you won't generate the hue of the secondary color. This is because a hue has the fewest other colors inside of it. Think of it as a blue is just original blue. By mixing two primary colors that carry other tints, tones, and shades inside of them, you're technically adding more than two colors into the mixture, making your final color more dependent on the compatibility of more than two original colors. If you were to mix the hues of red and blue together, for instance, you'd get purple, right? But if you mix a tint of red with the hue of blue, then you'll get something slightly tinted purple in return. And speaking of tints, you get different tints when you basically add white to a color. An oversimplification of this is when you're adding white, you are making that color lighter. Now, you can actually also add both white and black to a color, which brings us to tone. Tone and saturation essentially mean the same thing, but most people use saturation if they're talking about colors being created for digital images. Tone is generally used a lot more for painting. But in a nutshell, it's when you add both black and white, also known as gray, to create a tone. And finally, we have shade. You may recognize the term shade because it's used quite often to refer to light and dark versions of the same hue. But actually, a shade is technically when it's the color you get when you add black to any given hue. Various shades just refer to how much black you are adding. And now that we have the general basics of color theory down, let's talk about how we actually use all this info in your artistic endeavors. You've probably noticed that some colors look great together and others just don't. The colors we choose can actually help enhance a work of art or take away from it. Here are some things to remember when considering and choosing your colors. We need to discuss context. When you're trying to figure out how to design an image, a painting, or graphic, it's important to remember how we perceive colors and the context in which we see them. Color context refers to how we perceive colors as they contrast with another color. Colors may appear to be different depending on the colors they're next to. For example, the inner red square in this image is the same size, shape, and color in all four boxes. The only thing that changes is the background color, yet some of the squares appear softer or brighter depending on the contrasting color behind it. You may even notice movement or even depth changes just based on one color change. The same goes for the orange and blue squares here. This is because the way in which we use two colors together changes how we perceive it. So when you're choosing colors, think about how much contrast you want in your design. Luckily, there are some logical rules for figuring out how to create color schemes that work well together. The first of such rules is called an analogous color scheme. Analogous color schemes are formed by pairing one main color with the two colors directly next to it on the color wheel. Analogous structures do not create themes with high contrasting colors, so they're typically used to create a softer, less contrasting design, such as Monet's water lilies pictured here. Generally, things have a tendency to blend together in this case, so if you're looking for something with more contrast, you might want to go with another option. Which brings us to the complementary color scheme. The complementary color scheme is based on the use of two colors which are directly across from each other on the color wheel. Complementary color scheme does provide the greatest amount of color contrast. Often, artists will use one color predominantly throughout the image and then use the second color, which is across from it, as an accent in the image. This is the case with the Van Gogh painting pictured here. Next up, we have monochromatic color schemes. Using a monochromatic color scheme allows you to create a design based on various shades, tints, and tones off of one hue. You'd want to employ a monochromatic color scheme when creating high contrast is not necessary. However, monochromatic schemes don't tend to necessarily pop as much. Picasso's Blue Period is a great example of this. Not a ton of contrast, but still very expressive with use of tone, shading, and tints. Now we have triadic color schemes, which offer high contrast in color schemes while retaining generally the same tone. Triadic color schemes are created by choosing 3 colors, triadic, that are equally placed in lines around the color wheel. Triad color schemes are useful for creating high contrast images between each color in a design. In Vermeer's Milkmaid, for example, one color blue is well balanced with the orange and the yellow. When using a triadic color scheme, it is suggested that you pick one dominant color and then 2 secondary colors. Otherwise, it could prove a little bit tricky to balance all 3 colors without having to work the colors over and over and over again. And last but not least, we have a split complementary color scheme. A split complementary scheme includes one dominant color and 2 colors directly adjacent to the dominant color's complement. In other words, this scheme uses a base color and then 2 secondary colors. It is similar to the complementary color scheme, but one of the complements is split. This creates a more nuanced color palette than a complementary color scheme while still retaining the benefits of contrasting colors. In this example, another Monet is shown. We have the orange that is contrasting against the blue and green, which are adjacent complementary colors. No matter which color scheme you choose, try and keep in mind what your artistic needs are. If you need to create contrast, then choose a color scheme that gives you that. On the other hand, if you just need to find the best versions of certain colors, then play around with something monochromatic until you find your perfect shades and tints. I found that simply understanding how color schemes are built goes a long way for helping me choose the right color. Now, as I stated earlier in this video, sometimes colors will be readily obvious. If you're painting a seascape, you wouldn't want the ocean to be red unless you're evoking some seriously intense imagery. However, if you're looking to go outside of the realm of what's expected and subvert the colors in your painting, that's when understanding these color relationships really comes in handy. Even if you're not looking to go that far outside of the box, understanding these relationships between colors can help in more regular situations. For example, a forest looks entirely different during the daytime than it does at night. Being able to see how different colors interact can help you understand and tackle images like these more easily. Now, before you go off exploring the wide world of color, here are some few parting tips when you're choosing colors. I like to start with one color that I like. Every time I design something, I start with one color and build the color scheme from there. Next up, save your colors. If you find a color or color scheme that you like, it'll probably be useful to you later. Now, I wouldn't suggest using the same color scheme for every single thing that you make, but it's a good idea to write down or at least try to remember how you made specific colors if you like them. Lastly, practice makes perfect. The more you play with color, the better you get. No one creates a masterpiece the first time around, and this is a lot of theory and information packed in here. So the more you use it, the better you'll get at it. When it comes to choosing colors, understanding the theory behind color can do wonders for how you actually use it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe to HCA Live's video channel and check out some of our other videos. And as always, please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time, folks.